Okay, thank you,
Thank you,
Councillor
David.
Bobby. Do we have any more questions from the floor? I just have one for myself. Okay, thank you. So shaking of heads. Louise, thank you very much for a wonderful presentation. It was really good. I've just got one question, which is to do with 12.1 about the unprecedented rise in demand for SEND support and assessments, etc. Given that whilst there is enthusiastic support from the schools, I just wonder what, with them being run ragged and with the increase in demand and therefore the increase in workload, whether this is actually any danger of this derailing what is a very good project.
I don't think it's about ruining the project. I think, yeah, it is a concern. You know, we are very worried about the increase in demand in the HCPs, but what this project is basically, I think what we're seeing from this project is that it would be much worse if we didn't have it. But there will be some needs, particularly if we talk about COVID, around anxiety and sensitization. Lots of challenges for children that we really haven't seen. We don't really know what we've got in the system yet. But having our social emotional mental health needs teachers alongside our schools means we should be able to pick it up quickly, because what we find is, because they're in school every week, they can quite often be spotting children almost, as they're walking around the school sometimes. And although they can't discuss the case without parental permission, which is quite right, they can actually talk to practitioners if they see something and say, they can actually act early to support practitioners to support children, as it were. So I think it is a real concern. But I think in Rutland, it's not as much of a concern as it is in many of our surrounding counties. It's very difficult in other areas, much more difficult in other areas. That's not to say it's not going to be an ongoing challenge for us in Rutland. I'm sure it is.
Okay, thank you very much. In which case, if there's no further questions, I don't see any hands raised. We'll move on to the recommendations. The recommendation being that this committee notes the progress and emerging impact of the Centre Recovery Plan group of projects and is happy to endorse the actions plan to continue to positively impact the high needs budget deficit. Could I have a show of hands, please? Just thank you very much indeed. Jane? You're on mute. I so wanted to say that.
That's unanimous. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Good. Thank you, everybody. Councillor Baines.
There was one abstention.
Oh,
I abstained.
right. Thank you.
If I can explain, Chairman, had I not contacted governance this afternoon, I would not have known of the agenda or the confirmation of this meeting. I contacted governance, and Jane did contact me by email at 2:45 today, but very promptly, I think 5 minutes after I put the phone down. I'm not in the least pretending that I have had time to read, and I didn't have a hard copy, which I would need to look at the detail of this. I'm abstaining on this one because I hadn't got remotely near looking at that item. I hope I will be able to contribute to some of the earlier bits, Chairman, but speaking as someone who served on this panel before, I know both the enthusiasm of the officers, the emotional content of a lot of what we are dealing with, and I think it is incumbent on us as members to be as well prepared as possible when we're discussing these things. It doesn't mean that I'm not prepared to ask questions, but I fully support the direction of travel, but I do feel rather miffed this evening, shall we say. I know it was only confirmed at council meeting on Monday, but the leader had asked me a fortnight ago if I would fill a place on this panel, to which I agreed, and I would have hoped to have had rather earlier notice. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you for that, Councillor Baines, and I can only apologise for what's obviously been some administrative errors, and thank you for being so open and honest. Okay, so any other items before we move on to agenda item 9? Okay, thanks everybody. So in this particular case,
Sorry, Chair, Dawn Godfrey has her hand raised.
do you? Oh,
Sorry.
hello. Yeah, sorry,
Sorry,
I had head
Chair.
down reading. Go
You
ahead.
can probably guess what I'm going to ask. Could Louise be excused from the rest of the meeting?
Yes, of course. Yes, I'm so sorry. That was ignorant.
Thank
of me.
you.
Yeah, by all means, please. Louise, thank you very much for your contribution. So, moving back to item 9, and who's presenting this? Dawn, is that you?
Yes, I will start.
Thank you very much.
So, Scrutiny Committee were interested in the services that Children's Services commission. And the report that you have before you, and particularly the Appendix A, basically tells you what the arrangements are for commissioning in children's services, the governance of those arrangements, and obviously Appendix A is a very long list of all the different services that are commissioned by Children's Services. I'm not intending on going through that list. You're probably pleased to hear. One of what I think is important is to probably bring your attention to some of our bigger items which we commission, so some of the bigger services which I think are probably of more note. When I say bigger, that might be in size, or it might be in terms of contract value. So in terms of children's social care, there's certain services that actually, because of the size of Rutland, we wouldn't have the resources or revenue to be able to deliver good quality services internally. So those areas include adoption services, which we commission Lincolnshire County Council to provide on our behalf. We are, however, full members of the Regional Adoption Agency. We also have our legal services with Peterborough City Council. Those legal services are specifically for children's care proceedings. So there are different arrangements in place for other aspects of RCC legal services. In terms of children's social care, it's purely around our care proceedings. And our out of hours service, which is basically the social work service that operates outside of usual office hours and weekends, bank holidays, etc. We commission Leicestershire County Council on our behalf to provide those. Following the Ofsted inspection in March 2020, where particularly our commissioning and contract monitoring arrangements in children's social care were criticised, I set up a children's commissioning group, which I chair. Karen Kibble-White, as head of commissioning, attends that, as does my children's services heads of service. And the purpose of that is to oversee, initially it was set up to oversee children's social care commissioning. That has widened out now and across all children's services commissioning. And that monitors and quality ensures that we've got good contract monitoring system in place, including quality assurance of any contracts that we have. I'm pleased to say that actually since March 2020, we have monthly contract monitoring arrangements, meetings in place with those local authorities that I've just mentioned. Our contract monitoring arrangements have been strengthened, and we have seen improvements in those service areas as well. There are various other commissioning and contracts in place which are around in relation to early help, SEND and inclusion. and that includes our youth justice service and education psychology in particular. But we also have a range of other commissioned services, such as our CENDIAS provision, and particularly a high value piece of high value is our Healthy Child programme, which Public Health Commission on our behalf for the 0 to 19 age group. We'll probably come back to that in terms of a bit more detail. I'm sure members might be interested. And then you will also see, as part in terms of the report, but also the Appendix A, there's a huge range of much smaller contracts in place, both across SEND and early help, but also our learning and skills too. I won't go into the report talks through the kind of the more technical arrangements around what commissioning is, how it's done, how it's quality assured. I won't go into that. I won't go through that detail because I will make the assumption that members have read the report. But I'm very happy to take any questions. And Bernadette is here, who will be able to talk in far more detail around any areas associated with SEND, early help and inclusion. So any questions?
Mute, Chair.
Thank you, Dawn, for that introduction. And if he can wipe the smirk off his face, then we'll go across and ask Councillor Beggy to ask a question.
Sorry for my frivolity. Dawn, just a few, not diving down to detail, some helicopter questions really. There is a huge amount of moving parts in this whole process. Large amounts of different providers, different counties. It must be an enormous job to manage and control. I just wondered if you could talk me through and give reassurance about how that manages, because all these moving parts, it must, the potential for things to go wrong or slip through the cracks must be enormous. I'm not saying for 1 second that happens, but when I see this amount of moving parts, you think, oh God, there's room for error here.
I think you make an incredibly good point. And I think that was one of the things that Ofsted were picking up on in relation to, at the time, the lack of some of the governance around our commissioning in children's services. I suppose my first thing I need to say is that I have fabulous heads of service who are very, very aware and knowledgeable of every contract and commission service in their areas. And I also have very good service managers who are the people who are on that daily basis ensuring that we're getting good value for money as well as a good quality service as well. And then we do have a very good commissioning head of service who also, and a commissioning, and obviously she has her own team who also assist in having that kind of overview of all the commissioned services as well. There are lots of moving parts. What I would say is an awful lot of effort and detail is gone into at the point of commissioning a service or renewing a contract. And if by putting in the detailed work at the beginning and being absolutely clear about what we expect from a contract and how we monitor it, how we're going to quality assure it, and following those processes through, that's what gives me and you as members the assurance that clearly we require, because this is RCC public money that we are spending. So we have got very robust processes in place now, I'm pleased to say, in relation to that, both value for money and quality assurance of service.
Well, I think it's obvious from the outside that it is being managed well. So in your opinion, actually having this many moving parts is wholly manageable and drives better value for money.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Just on the question then of value for money and the metrics in which you monitor these contracts, could you just give me a bit of insight into how that's done? There's a bit of text here in each of these about value for money, but very few of them are quantitative KPIs. Can't say quantitative very well.
Yeah. So in terms of at the outset of commission, when we're going through the kind of commissioning process, we'll have drawn up a service specification in terms of what we require, what we expect. And when that goes out to, when we go out to tender, there is a, and I can't remember, Bernadette might have to help me out here with the technical phrase, but basically there is a weighting and scoring system which evaluates any bids that come through. Those weightings may differ depending on the type of, on the service specification, but broadly the things that are always within there are the quality of service, the value for money, and then there will often be something around capacity and outcomes as well, and impact.
So the KPI, sorry, the KPIs these are monitored on are
and then there will
not
be
subjective.
And so each contract will have a performance data or a performance indicators associated with them that are they're then monitored against or assessed against.
That's what I was just trying to get to. It's
Yes.
objective, not subjective. Okay. And
Absolutely.
my final question before I leave you alone. We've got the 0 to 19 Healthy Child Programme, for example, which is a £1.9 million contract, but seemingly for whatever reason, we have left the review of that contract late, so we're having to provide an extension. It's just interesting why that is and what process we put in place to make sure that these are reviewed in a timely fashion. Obviously 1.9 million is not the smallest of contracts.
No, so in terms of the Healthy Child Programme, that's fully funded through the Public Health Grant, and it is led by our public health colleagues. The reason why we extended that was because we wanted to do a full review and change to the service specifications from the current contract. So the current contract is still running. And what we wanted to do was separate out the 0 to 19 Healthy Child Programme into two parts. So the 0 to 11 element and then the 11 plus element. Now, the 0 to 11 element is fairly straightforward because it is 95%, 98% mandated by NHS England. So what that covers is obvious things like health visiting is the obvious kind of big part of the 0 to 11. And that's the bulk of the contract. But what we wanted to do with the 11 plus element was to really work out what we know about our 11 to 19-year-olds in Rutland and work out what's going to really meet the health needs of that group. And that piece of work has taken a little bit more time, and we anticipate it may or may not be the same provider as what we've got now. And we wanted to give ourselves enough time to be able to get that service specification absolutely right for that 11 plus cohort group. But at the same time, if there was a new provider, for example, build in time for any TUPE arrangements, etc., that may be required. So it isn't that the contract kind of didn't get reviewed in time as such. It was more because we, as RCC, felt that we wanted to improve on the service and the contract that was currently in place, but we wanted to make sure that we got that right for our young people in Rutland.
Thank you, Dawn. That's 100% justifiable. So that's reassuring. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much indeed. So next up is Councillor Brown, Andrew Brown.
Thank you, Chair. I've got a bit of a list of questions here, Dawn, but moving on from what Nick said, with so many moving parts, is there any danger of sort of duplication or repetition? And is there any scope to amalgamate any of the services? Because to a layperson like me, it seems like there might be some overlap in some of them.
I think that's a really good point, actually, because there are lots of different moving parts. Whenever a contract or commission service comes up for its either review, or we're coming up to where we need to think about either recommissioning a service, we always start from the point of looking at actually what's already in place. Do we still, and ask ourselves the question, do we need to commission this service at all? That's the first question. Do we still need to commission the service at the same level? So that goes back to that value for money question. And obviously, by answering those questions, we're looking at what else we've already got in place, as in, is there something else happening that we can actually extend, for example, as well. So that's all happening as part of any review of a commissioned arrangement.
Okay, thanks. I mean, are there any sort of non-statutory delivery items where we can save any money? There's one I picked out of the family group conference service, which is 25,000. I mean, is that our responsibility?
Yeah, that is non-statutory. We only spot purchase that as and when required. We don't have a contract as in with somebody who will say we will provide X amount, and if they do or they don't, they still get paid. It's a spot purchase arrangement.
Okay, and then in the youth justice service, so there was 74,000, and I know you said there wasn't very good value for money, but that sort of works out at over 5,000 per child. Seems we only had, was it 15 or something? So what exactly did we get for that 5,000?
So in terms of the youth justice contract, we are currently in the process of renewing that contract. It is a statutory requirement, so every top tier authority has to provide youth justice services. It would make, the reason why we our provider is Leicestershire County Council is because the judicial system footprint matches, obviously covers Rutland and Leicestershire. It would make things very complicated and very, I think, detrimental to our young people if we were to step outside of that judicial area. In terms of part of the renegotiation of the current contract, Bernadette can talk in probably a bit more detail because she's much closer to the negotiations than I am. But certainly what we've looked to do is reduce the value of that contract for the new start in March of next year. Oh, well, April 22 really. So we have reduced the value of that contract for the upcoming contract, for the new contract.
But £5,000 a year, I just wondered what we got for that, because that's basically what we spent.
I'll let Bernadette come in for the service.
Thank you, Dawn. Thank you, Councillor Brown. That's a very helpful question, and you're absolutely right to ask that. The current value of the contract is £70,000. It's in fact, the value is actually 74, but we have always withheld 4,000 through the life of the contract. And as Dawn said, we are tied into the contract with Leicestershire County Council. When we reviewed the previous contract over 3 years ago, one of the things we wanted to put in place, which was to reflect the needs of Rutland, was that we didn't need a large contract that related to the statutory duties. We have to have the statutory duties around court disposal, etc. But actually what we wanted for Rutland was an element of prevention and early intervention. So to work with our community safety team, our youth services team, to address issues like antisocial behaviour, low-level antisocial behaviour. So we created the contract so we had an element of both. We were also very clear that we wanted a presence in Rutland, and so therefore we had 0.7 of a practitioner working in Rutland. Now, over the period of the contract, we've putting some quite robust contract management and QA and a QA framework around that, because we weren't convinced we were getting value for money. We didn't have the numbers. Just to give you an example, as Dawn mentioned, we take our activity reports and our contract reports to the commissioning group bi-monthly. The November meeting, we took a report around the youth justice contract. In Q2, we had 7 referrals into the service. And of those, there were 7 that were actually, of those, there were statutory disposal, what we call statutory orders or court disposals. And we had 2 prevention contracts. What was telling us really was that we didn't need that level of a contract of that value and that scale. We're in negotiation with the youth service team service at Leicestershire at the moment. We're anticipating reducing that contract by potentially £20,000 a year. Well, and also not only just the value of the contract, because that's difficult, because one of the purposes of going to market is that you're testing whether you can, and Dawn mentioned earlier, what's the methodology. We put in place what are called method statements. So we're testing both quality, level of service, and value for money. And through the procurement process, you determine where you want to put your weighting, for example. So in terms of the youth justice contract, we've decided that the model that's emerging, and we will take a proposal back to the commissioning group in the January meeting, is that we have a core contract, a smaller core contract, that will enable us still to meet our statutory duty around court disposals, but also we'll spot purchase the preventative and early intervention side, because you're quite right. What we've been looking at alongside this is what is happening in our services for young people. So in other words, our youth services, what are they doing? And that is covering that area of work. And also we're not going to rely on one practitioner from the Youth Justice Service to be in Rutland, because again, we were finding there wasn't sufficient or an effective, we weren't getting an sufficient or effective presence, to be perfectly honest. So we will spot purchase that element. So if we want presence at the joint action group, for example, or to work with an individual in Rutland, we'll buy that as we need it. So that gives us a more robust and contract and a service, I believe. It's better value for money and reflecting what Rutland needs.
Okay, thank you. And as part of the judiciary, I may even send some of people to see you at some stage. But there we go. My final point is on page 19 about the special educational needs. It was 540,000, and is it really going to rise to 774? I mean, that's almost £250,000 extra. Why is it going to be so much more?
I think one of the things that Louise touched on in the SEND report is that the demand, again, the education psychology element, that is a statutory duty. The local authority has a duty to assess and put in place plans for children with additional needs. A key element of that assessment is an education psychology clinical assessment. The increase in demand in plans and assessments is such that we have to increase the capacity in the education psychology service. We have at the moment, we've got 275 children with education, health and care plans, and we currently have 0.6 equivalent of an education psychologist for Rutland. Now, we don't operate like that because we commission it. We have about 5 education psychologists in the team, which provides us with that resilience. So we've chosen not to do a direct delivery of that service ourselves. We've gone out to the market. It's working very well for us. The current provider, Partners in Psychology, have a very good track record in Rutland. The quality, parents are satisfied with the quality of the assessments. Our schools are satisfied with the quality of assessments. We don't have waiting lists, unlike many local authorities, and we haven't had difficulty being able to meet the demand, but actually the demand is rising. We've seen an additional 21 plans compared to this time last year. The year before it was in the region of 26. And that really is the essence of the messages that were coming through in Louise's presentation. Our intention is to work to change the system so we are not seeing, we're trying to stop that flow into the statutory SEND system. Having said that, our education psychology service have a developmental and systemic developmental offer within the contract, and we recognize that they are really, really key to working with our schools. So as well as the core contract, they have a number of small other contracts and actually have a service level agreement with each of the schools. So outside of the statutory process, schools can buy additional education psychology time, but we don't allow that to draw on what is our core contract. Otherwise, we wouldn't meet need.
I think the other thing, just to add, in terms of that contract value increase, it's exactly as Bernadette's just described. I think there's the other bit of context to it is that there is a shortage of education psychologists, both regionally and nationally, and that's also driving up costs generally. Yeah. So that's part of the other part of the context.
Okay, thanks.
Councillor Beggy, you want to come in with a quick supplementary?
Oh, yes, sorry, I just want to supplement on what Andrew was saying. I'm still just a little bit confused. We've got £500,000 worth of budget going up to 750 or something. So that's effectively a 50% increase in spend. You mentioned that, I think, roughly 250 in the system, expecting another 21 increase per annum, which is a 10% increase. So we're seeing a 10% increase in demand, but a 50% increase in cost. I can't quite tally one with the other.
When I say, I mean, I've made specific reference to the number of assessments and plans, but also we have to have education psychology input if a child's needs change and we have to reassess them or they have to change placement. So that is another unpredicted need. If we have a tribunal, we may be required by the court to provide an education psychology report. We have built into the contract is critical incident responses. So if, for example, schools had, and we've had a situation in the previous academic year, if there's been pupil deaths or there's been an incident in the school that requires either support, psychological support for the team, the staff team, or the children, then we have a responsibility to respond to that as well. And some elements of the contract that have been delivered, we've never actually, we've never funded correctly through the contract, and it puts us in danger of being able to secure a provider. I mean, one of the things, obviously, that's the value we're stating there. We're out to procurement. The contract procurement goes live on the 7th of January. And obviously, one of the things we'll have done, as Dawn has described in the process, in the whole commissioning process, is we started this reviewing this contract last February to put in place a new contract by next August. So we've already done a soft market testing. So we've looked at the options available to us across a whole range of local authorities and a whole range of different models. And we've also done the the options appraisal. And because it is a statutory, because it is a clinical role, we're in the position where we don't have a lot of options other than that. We have tested elements of the work, whether it could be delivered by a specialist teacher, but at the moment that's not in our gift, and it's been tested by some local authorities. But the elements that we need in terms of the assessment of children with additional needs, it is still very much a function of an education psychologist, and that required set of skills.
So Bernadette, this is still out for.
The contract
is still out for tender. So that
yes,
cost is an estimate.
Yes, that absolutely, and obviously where we can, but we can, and we have discussed the option to fund some of that contract from the High Needs Fund. We could choose to do that, or we could take that to Schools Forum and seek approval to do that. However, the difficulty is that what it does is it then increases the pressure on the High Needs Fund. And because these are local authority statutory duties, it is incumbent on the local authority to provide those assessments.
I understand it, Bernadette, but we do have to question it when we see such large changes.
Absolutely.
And I don't know about other members, but I would be interested to see what the final outcome is, even if just a 1 minute update when you've got a final contract.
We can send an update round to scrutiny members.
Yeah, just an email and just
processes
as it's been raised. Yeah, I think we just need to see it.
Yeah.
Thank you, guys. Much appreciated.
We're just working through the method statements, and we've also got the evaluation in place. Once we have been out and the contract goes live, and it'll be live for a number of weeks, we can then give you an indication of what the market is and what the market's telling us.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Sorry you had to wait so long. Councillor June Fox.
Hello. It's really on page 31, 32, the provision of ADHD solutions services. Who are ADHD solutions? It says they're a local company. Are they Rutland or are they Leicestershire?
They're an independent charitable provider that work across Rutland and Leicestershire.
So are they based in Rutland or Leicestershire?
They have a presence in Rutland, yes. So they work with our families in Rutland, and they deliver support groups and sessions and training sessions for parents and for our schools. And they work with our schools as well.
Okay. They have two contracts. They've got the same start dates and they've got different termination dates. I'm assuming that's just a typo, and that they both end the contract on the 31st of March 22. Are we actually looking to extend that contract?
Yes, we are. Yeah, but there's two elements to the contract, because we can have a provider. Yeah. We have a contract with them to deliver some of our support to families through our Aiming High program, funded through there. But we also, as part of the interventions that Louise was describing in our SEND recovery plan, there's also a contract with ADH Solutions as well to deliver parental support.
Okay. It says that you're in 3 secondary schools. Do you know which 3 they are?
We only have 3 secondary schools in Rutland. It's
all right. Sorry, I'm new to this panel.
No, it's fine. So it's Cadmus College.
Forgive me.
No, it's Cadmus College, Casterton
Uppingham
College, and Uppingham Community College.
Okay, lovely. I think that was all actually. Yeah. Okay, thanks very much.
Thank you, Councillor Fox. Councillor Baines, I can see your hand waving at me.
Thank you very much, Paul. Yes, from my point of view, looking at this sort of paper, I look for 3 things really. Is it a statutory requirement? How much will it cost? And how many people are actually using the service? So those are my 3 starting points. And I assume that the column labeled value on Appendix A was, in fact, my interpretation of column labelled cost. So I've worked on that that assumption. I've got 2 or 3 questions on the general preamble, Chairman, and then a couple on the appendix. The first thing was 9.1. Again, I've simply copied onto a bit of paper from my email thing, so apologies if I haven't given you the correct references, but it was 9.1, I think. The last sentence in that says there is no way to mitigate this pressure. That worried me because it struck me as that it might be a self-fulfilling prophecy. So that is really a comment rather than a question. 10.1, I noticed that we referred on the figures to a European directive, and I wondered, I thought this was now obsolete and we'd have a good British one in its place. So, I assumed, actually, without being facetious, that we simply hadn't altered the criteria. Am I correct in that?
You are correct in that, Councillor Baines.
Yeah.
Just in relation to your question around 9.1,
Yes.
it relates to, so the education psychology contract we've just been talking about is the increase in the contract value does put a pressure on the council's special educational needs operations budget, and that's the budget that RCC are liable for. However, we can, and obviously, but the only way to mitigate that pressure on the RCC budget would be to increase the cost, increase the pressure on the high needs block, which is part of the dedicated schools grant, and we would have to go to Schools Forum to get their permission to do so.
Yeah, thank you very much for that explanation. Again, I think my point really was the tone of that, and I quite see that negotiation between funding sources, shall we say, but I wouldn't want it closed off, which it rather implied on that. But sure. Thank you for that. That's a much clearer explanation. The next point I got was 10.3, create more choice and control for children and carers. Now, when I previously served on this panel and its predecessor, I always firmly, and I haven't altered my opinion, that needs-led budget, and I recognise that quite often people moving into the county bring with them a disproportionate cost, shall we say. I don't mean that there aren't some native ones as well, but I recognise that, and I haven't changed that. It did strike me that that 10.3 was rather an open check situation. If you ask a child, would it like some more chocolate? It will certainly say yes, and it will not really be bothered about the fact that his teeth may drop out when it's 30. But my point is that on that, I'm very happy with more choice and control. At the same time, that last word, control, I think has got to rest with the county council. It's a nice to have thing rather than an obligatory thing.
I wonder, sorry, Councillor Baines, if I could just, may I come in, Chair, and just give Councillor Baines an example just to illustrate what's behind some of that. If I give you an example for our Aiming High budget, which is our support for children with families with additional needs. Again, the local authority has a duty to provide support through early intervention and positive activities. What we have found in the past, we would have commissioned those services and provided them to families. And we shifted that where we turned it into a direct payments. So we set a threshold, we agreed an eligibility criteria, and then we said to families, after a long period of consultation, here's the equivalent of the money that you would get, and you can choose how you spend it within a set of parameters. And actually what we have found, some families have found that really helpful. They've had they've been able to use it creatively to meet the needs of their child, to meet the needs of the rest of the family. But actually, we have found also that the spend on that budget has decreased, because some families have said, you know, I haven't used it as much. I didn't need it. I put this in place. My child was able to access a community provision, and actually now they're more independent and they don't need it. So that was an example where we stopped commissioning a provider and we gave the money to the families to determine how they needed it. And we've had a lot of very positive feedback from families that that's worked for them. And certainly it's an area that will get tested by our external regulators, by Ofsted and by our peer review, to check that we're offering that opportunity to families wherever possible. I think we've still got lots of more work that we could be doing in terms of personal budgets. We're in very early conversations with our CCG, our clinical commissioning groups, about the opportunity to do some creative commissioning there, where we can, where we pass an element of that finance to families to use the way they would find helpful, rather than trying to, for us to get into a very complex commissioning process where we can.
No, thank you for that. Again, my only concerns, I'd say, that it was open-ended. I'm all in favour of freedom of choice, and if that means that the service users are themselves more satisfied, and you know, that is absolutely fine. I certainly don't want to make any moral judgments on anything of that. I'll quote Dr. Johnson to you that when Boswell complained, he'd given a penny to a beggar, and he said he'll only spend it on beer and tobacco. And Dr. Johnson's reply was, "And why, sir, should we deny him those comforts through his existence?" And I would entirely agree with that. I like the personal choice element, but equally, as a responsible councillor, I've got to look at the budgetary concerns. But thank you for that. My final point before I move to the appendix, if I may, Chairman, and you're being indulgent in the length of time you're giving me. I wondered on 14.1 how many of those early interventions meant, and I quite see it's delicate on numbers, because in reference the numbers are small and easily identified. But so perhaps percentage terms, how many of them no longer require those services? Because for me, that would be a huge measure of success. I'm not saying that success for an officer would be to make his or her post redundant, but I do think there is a point there where if that early intervention has been successful, then that service user will no longer be in the system. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely.
And I think that the point you're making, Councillor Baines, is speaks back to when we were talking about any point where either we feel a contract isn't being used or needs to be during the process of review isn't required, then we will stop that we will stop the contract and stop that commission service. Absolutely.
Yeah. And I'd probably add, in terms of, we made reference to our public health contract. One of the areas we're looking at particularly is around healthy lifestyles for young people, and particularly in our 11+ contract. Well, clearly, if we promote healthy lifestyles with young people, there's less risk of them developing more complex health needs, and therefore putting additional pressure on our hospital services or our specialist services. So by promoting a healthy lifestyle in whatever form that is, then we are hoping further down the line we're reducing the risk of health, disease and disorders.
If I may, Chairman, I've got just 2 or 3 points on the appendix, or as far as I've read in the appendix there anyway. The first one was the youth service, and I think it's already been alluded to. It's got a cost of 74k there, and I noticed in the notes that 10 to 15 users there, but one individual
is proving, shall we say, considerably more costly, if I've read it correctly, than the rest. Really only just highlighting that, both the strength and the weakness in Rutland. Again, I'll be cautious in what I say, but shall we say, in one of our market towns a few years ago, one individual, and it was well known in the community and known to the police, responsible for about between 70 and 90% of all, well, more than petty crime. And once there was sufficient evidence to imprison that individual, believe it or not, the crime rate dropped enormously. I know lost sheep and all the rest, but sometimes proportionality, I think, comes into it. That's an observation on that one.
Can I just quickly come in here, Councillor Baines, if I may, if I could ask you to keep your questions as succinct as possible. I think we've had quite a lot of lateral forbearance.
I will indeed, very, very rapidly. Like two of my colleagues, I picked up on the huge increase in the educational psychology thing. Just a very quick point on the sport thing. I noticed parental contributions were there. They amount to less than 10%. I make a general point. Some of these nice to have things, I think we really could ask for some contribution. That is just a quick comment. Again, delighted on a tiny thing, the Empingham one, it's a very small thing, helping military families, it's focused on it. These small schemes, absolutely support. And I think we might, again, going back to the balancing of costs, a reduction on one or two of the larger budgets makes an enormous difference in small projects. And very, very quickly, and you did say I can ask a question, Chairman, on the early years, I didn't know what scaling questions meant. What does scaling questions mean? It's there in the report.
I read that as a typo, to be honest.
Sorry,
Anyway, sorry.
I'm trying to find what page we're looking at.
If we're able to find it, if I think what you're probably referring to, Councillor Baines, and I'm taking a little guess because I can't quite locate.
No, I'm sorry, I haven't got the page in front of me.
Scaling questions we would use scaling questions with children and families to determine outcomes. So
yes.
it may be that we would look at where a child has started, if it was in their education or it was a family situation, and we might scale the family situation at the beginning of an intervention, and then we would scale again at the end of the intervention. And we would be looking what we describe as distance traveled. We would looking to see positive outcomes, and a scaling methodology is a very simple way of doing that.
Yes. Yeah, again, I didn't understand that. And the other, in that same thing, I saw the point about military families, but I didn't know what universal families were.
Universal families just relates to anybody in Rutland with a child.
Oh, so that's fine, thank you.
They don't have to have any particular additional need, for example. It's any and every child and family.
I see. And a final point, Chairman, thank you for your indulgence, is the last thing on the healthy child, which I think is nearly 200,000. It's just shy of it, I think, which we pay out to Leicestershire. And I was very pleased to see that the future thing, there would be a Rutland specific element in that, because I'm all in favour of good neighbourliness, but I think Rutland needs and Leicester needs are not necessarily identical. Thank you very much, Chairman.
Okay, thank you very much for that all-inclusive questioning session. I did give you a little bit of latitude because you weren't able to get any questions in on agenda item 10.
Thank you.
I hope you're pleased. Good, thank you very much indeed. I've just got a couple of points I want to make, really, which is just reiterating what was said earlier on, and that is that the children's services are indeed complex. The number of contracts due for renewal next year, 21. That's a heck of a lot of contracts. Number of agencies involved, 20. And all of which is a little worrying, but I'm sure you all got it in hand, and certainly the earlier questioning gave me great faith that actually you have got it in hand, because if I'm absolutely honest, it wasn't really in the report how you actually manage your governance. And if you're able to give a copy of the sort of process you go through when developing a service contract or some sort of scheme, I'd really appreciate that, actually. Yeah, thank you very much indeed, because that gives me a huge amount of confidence. And I noticed that in March, it's going to be particularly busy. You've got 6 contracts due for renewal all on the 31st of March. So keep up the good work. Anybody got any other points they want to make? No, I can see a few tired looking faces and voices here. So what I think what we'll do now is that we'll call that to a debate. Thank you, everybody. We have the appointment of a vice chair. I don't think we need the officers for that, and any other urgent business, and also the review of the forward annual plan. So I'm more than happy, unless we have objections from the panel, to allow the officers and Councillor Wilby to move on if they so wish, and we will get back down to the appointment of a vice chair, etc. So thank you very much for your contributions this evening. Oh, Councillor Beggy.
No, Chad, sorry, someone's ringing my doorbell, that's all. If I'm not back, carry on without me.
Yeah, it's going to be hard, Nick, but we'll try.
I know, try. It is Christmas, it might be Santa.
Okay, thank you very much indeed, Dawn. Thank you, Bernadette, and thank you, Councillor Wilby.
Thank you, Chair, and I wish all of you a very Merry Christmas and a happy, healthy and safe New Year. So good to see you all. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Jane, you're stuck here, I'm afraid.
It's always a pleasure.
Okay, we are going to have to wait, unfortunately, for Nick to come back from a visit from Santa. So just wait for him, because we're going. The next item is item 8, which is the appointment of a new vice chair. So has anybody got any mood music they can hum, or any anecdotes they wish to tell at this point?
I wouldn't inflict my singing on anybody. While most of us are here, does anybody have any urgent business they would like to raise? Nope.
No. Okay.
Oh, you could sing to us.
I could. I do sing out for Rutland, but I think actually I'm just going to keep my light firmly hidden underneath the bushel. Thank you. I don't even know what that means.
How's that going?
Well, the singing.
Yes.
I've had to jack it in. We've had so many Monday appointments, but it's easing off now, and so I shall be re-attending.
I do a bit of singing as well, but I won't inflict that on you either.
Do you sing?
I do sing, yes.
Oh, we'll have to form a little council choir, won't we? So I don't know where young Nick's gone. Shouldn't have let him go, should I? Told him to wait. That's what I should have done. Yeah.
It'll be Amazon.
Yeah, probably.
Well, they'd have gone by now if it was them, wouldn't they?
It must be Santa.
It must be. Or maybe he's getting a gong or something. Who knows? Right.
Is this the last item?
Oh, Councillor Harvey, did you want to say something?
No, I was just checking you didn't want me to go. I have to say,
you're always welcome to say.
I was
I'm surprised you stepped down
multitasking.
from your lofty perch, though, Sam. That's really
Yeah, no,
Sorry, I've got a problem I've got to deal with. Can I leave you to it?
well, do you want to have a quick? Do you have any recommendations for the
I've got an
vice
alarm
chair?
going off. I've got an alarm going off. I need to go and sort it out before the police turn up.
Okay.
Sorry.
Jane, can we continue with the election of vice chair?
Yeah, sorry.
Okay, thank you very much for letting us know. So item 8, do I have any nominations for vice chair? Okay, in which case I'd like to nominate Councillor Sue Webb, and I will. Am I looking for a seconder?
Yeah, I'd like to second.
Okay, and if we just, all those in favour, raise your hand, please.
Am I allowed to vote for myself?
Yes, you are. Yes. Can't see your hand though. Okay, next one. I'm sorry, only one. Paul Brown, are you voting in favour?
Yes, I've got. Can you see? Oh, no,
No, I can't see you at all, Paul. But that's not such a bad thing.
It's not a bad thing.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Congratulations, Councillor Sue Webb. You are now the vice chair.
Thank you.
Sorry, Councillor Paul Brown.
Yes,
Yes,
did-
did you vote yes?
yes, I did.
Thank
Yes.
you.
Yeah.
Okay, great stuff.
How did I bugger that up then?
Language, Timothy. So,
It's because your camera's not on, I can't see you.
Ah, right, okay.
okay, thank you all very much then. So having appointed our new vice chair, we've already done any other urgent business. So it's just a quick review of the forward plan and annual work plan. Does anybody have any suggestions or inclusions that they want to put into the annual work plan? Councillor Andrew Brown.
Well, the only thing is that it's in a format that on the in the papers that it's very hard to read because it's in really thin columns, and some of the words are even quite short words are truncated, and then you've got to look down, and then it goes on to another page. Can we not have it in a better format than that?
It's in 18 point, I guess, isn't it? Yes, Jane.
Yes, sorry, apologies, that was my fault. Because I have to convert the papers into 18-point version as a large print for a member of council. I accidentally attached the wrong version to the pack. But yes, you will get the normal version going out to future.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, are there any? Councillor Harvey, you have your hand up.
Thank you, Chair. It was just a small kind of reminder to you, just with regard to the work plan. We've obviously got the safeguarding thing that's due in February, I think. Is that right?
Yeah, I think so.
So just a reminder from, I did alert Councillor Waller to that item from the Ofsted Improvement Board, and suggested she liaise with you because it may well come through on that with that agenda item.
I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll take this offline, Councillor Harvey, and we'll have a quick discussion if that's okay with you.
Perfect, thank you.
And then I'll email everybody to let them know what we've cooked. Okay, has anybody got any questions they want to do?
Is Councillor
Brown.
Paul Brown?
No, I'm still trying to get my picture up. That's all I'm trying to do.
What about your hand? It's raised. Is that?
Well, I'm sorry, I'll take it off then.
Thank you.
Is that it?
If there are no other questions, thank you all very much for the questions and answers tonight. And that does include Nick, even though he's not here. And our next meeting is, frankly, is on Wednesday, the 26th of January, and that's a joint meeting with adults, and that's solely reserved for the budget. And that should be interesting, given for those of you that were present at the budget briefing yesterday, they were all given a stern warning. So we'll have to get our collective heads together. Okay, if there's no further matters, then I'll close the meeting at 20:45. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much.
Thanks, bye.
Okay, bye.
Councillor Paul
Bye.
Brown. Oh, he's gone.
It's
Already gone.
Missed him. That's all right. I was going to teach him how to put his camera on.
All right.
Thank you then.
Okay, thanks.
Good
Bye.
night.